now, according to Altos Research. Where the same week last year, that was 414,000. Lisa's cracking a Coors Light.
Beer, yeah. If you're not getting educated about local and national real estate market conditions, whether you're in title, finance, accounting, mortgage, or obviously a real estate agent, you're doing yourself and your client base a disservice. This is the Knowledge Brokers Podcast. I'm here with Byron Lazine and Lisa Chinatti. I'm Tom Toole, and I'm feeling a little optimistic this week, you two. We've seen some healthy inventory growth. Our friend and I would say Knowledge Broker substitute, Logan Modashami, said the same thing in his housing market tracker that he puts out every week, where it was the first week that we saw all year where we had inventory growth nationally at 16,582 new listings coming to the market. His range is he'd love to see like 11 to 17,000 new homes coming to the market on a weekly basis, which I like. And it's the first time we've hit that. I'm feeling it here. I know year over year in our MLS, we're up in the Philadelphia MSA 4%, according to Bright. Obviously, every market's different. Are you guys seeing this? Are you feeling it? Are your agents feeling it? And maybe we should talk about conversations with sellers and buyers around this piece of data.
Well, I will open up by saying when we were on our call this morning, I said I don't necessarily feel it here. We're still in what I would consider a solid seller's market, tight inventory, multiple offers across the board. The data shows that my gut on it is slightly off. We're up year over year from 3,200 listings on market to 3,800 listings on market. The number of listings signed so far year to date is up just over 1,000 in Massachusetts alone. So you can definitely see it's increasing, but I think buyer demand is still increasing as well.
Yeah, Connecticut's the anomaly of the country. So if you go to, what do we want? We want March, because April's not done yet. So March of 23, 7,400 homes for sale, all property types. And then March of this year, 5,900.
Wow.
So Connecticut is the lowest inventory level for the entire country. I do see, interestingly enough, months of inventory for the first time in over 12 months in Connecticut ticked up to 2.1. So even though there's less homes, it shows you that there is truly less demand because homes are sitting a little bit longer. There's less multiple offers, even when there's that significant drop in homes for sale. Across the country, totally different story. Tom pointed out, we've got 543,000 plus active listings across the country right now, according to Altos Research. Where the same week last year, that was 414,000. Lisa's cracking a Coors Light.
Beer, yeah.
My interview with Kevin Sears, he talks about cracking a Coors Light like in the beginning of the interview. It was a pretty fun opening there, but so well over 100,000 more active listings. That being said, I look at 2019 as what I would consider a pretty normal market, 862,000. So we're nowhere near 2019 levels. Obviously, we're nowhere near great financial crisis levels on inventory, but we're about to hit our peak. Inventory peak for 2023 was 569. We're at 543 right now. Mm-hmm. That 569 came in the end of the year. That came in October when rates got close to 8%, well after the summer. We're going to hit 569 and beyond during the spring market this year. And that's across the country. It's being driven by, places outside of the Northeast. I think our local markets are not what knowledge brokers are feeling. I talked to agents in Phoenix this week. I've talked to agents in Texas. I see what's happening in Florida. These states in particular, inventory is growing, and it's growing at a rapid rate. There's no question about that.
Well, you bring up some good points there. And when you talk about demand, I'll give you the local numbers here. This is actually for the Bright MLS, which I find to be very fast. It's a pretty regional MLS. Showings are down 14.3% this past week compared to the same week last year. So this is the kind of data that you really want to be paying attention to, because when you're speaking to a buyer, Lisa or Byron, and they're saying, well, it's too competitive out there. Well, hey, I'm not sure if you saw, but we're actually seeing 14% less showings that are happening and inventory is growing. So while it is competitive, Lisa, and I don't want to give the wrong impression here, multiple offers, the best homes are selling fast. We're still seeing that in our market as well. It's less competitive. It's a little less competitive right now. When you look at something Lance Lambert put out, which we're obviously a big fan of his, two-time guest on Knowledge Brokers here. There's a chart, Bobby. I'm going to share it with you. You can put it up. It's home buyers still outnumber home sellers in most markets from the John Burns Research and Consulting Agency, and he breaks it down by region. So the Northeast, where buyers outnumber sellers, it's 94% of the homes, 94% of the market. In the Midwest, it's 90%. California, it's around 81. And then you get into the Southeast, it's 73. And then you get to the Southwest, Texas, and Florida. Florida is the lowest. It's 30 or 34%, depending on South or North Florida. Texas is 46%, and the Southwest is 59%. And what we know, Byron, you said this, I think, last week, the trends hit the Southwest and the South first, and they kind of migrate into California, the Midwest, the Northeast. So this is some interesting data to be paying attention to, and I think it's some foreshadowing of what's going to come in 2025.
I want to comment on that. The buyers outnumbering the sellers. There's two parts to this that I think are pretty reflective of where we're at in this market. I think that's true. I actually think that's true almost everywhere when you go long term. Okay, not reflective of 60, 90 days. So I think the first thing is, and agents and knowledge brokers, this is really important for us to, get our arms around. There's less demand right now, but there's not less leads. Okay, I got to hear from Damian, who we're honored to have on the pod in a couple of weeks. Damian Eales from Realtor.com this week, Andy Florance from Homes.com, Rich Barton from Zillow, and I can give some insights to how they're thinking. But they're not in the business of generating less leads. But it's not that they're just creating leads out of thin air. There's a true thirst for home ownership to be involved in the U.S. real estate market long term. So for agents, it's like, okay, if I've got leads, people interested in my community, whether that's from a buy, sell, invest perspective, I need to be serving them fully along that journey. That journey just might be 2.5 years out. Fannie Mae just projected that we're not going to see 6.1 on the 30-year fixed until Q4 of 2024. 2025 Q4, when before they were talking about 5.9 for Q4 of this year. So this demand journey is going to be extended out a long period of time. So there's not less leads. There's less demand in the next 60 to 90 days. There's still people long-term interested. So long-term versus short-term mindset. And then with the buyers outnumbering the sellers, there are a number of buyers that, when things were so aggressive, when competition was at a peak and we saw extreme multiple offer situations, some of these folks missed out. So what did that condition some buyers to do? They're in the waiting game. So they've been waiting now forever. And even if there's more buyers than sellers, they're taking longer to go ahead and make that decision, because it's like, you know what? I missed out on the 2 perfect homes the last 12 months. What's another 6 months? I've already gotten accustomed. I've conditioned myself to be in the waiting game a little bit. So that's, I think, a little bit more, I guess, of a feel or my perspective, maybe my outlook on it with the buyers outnumbering the sellers.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think the other thing that we're diving into with our agents here is remembering the definition of a buyer's market versus a seller's market. And it's a little bit, I think, different now. I think one of the numbers that we always, when you look at months of supply, historically, we've said 6 months of supply equals a balanced market. When it's more than 6 months, it's a buyer's market. Less than 6 months, it's a seller's market. My gut says the new move forward is going to be more like 4 months is going to be the balance.
Redfin always goes off of 5. I was taught off of 6.
Yep.
So, I think there could be a market, depends on what market you're in. But
You also
between
got to,
4 to 6 kind of seems
yeah.
like the neutral zone to Lisa's point. We're at 3.2 months of inventory nationally right now, according to NAR.
Which would imply that we're getting close, right? And that's why I
Yeah.
bring it up, because when you look at it nationally and start to think about, if we start to hit a balanced market nationally, I said this morning as well in our call, I think we're seeing all the leading indicators. I can see them in Massachusetts. The leading indicators are telling us that it's starting to come, right? Our month supply is still 1.2, 1.3, somewhere in there. But the number of price changes is going up. The number of listings sitting on market, the days on market, those things are all starting to tick up, as are our listing appointments and the inbound seller inquiries. So I can see the signs.
Well, and with the time on market, you got under the 6 months I was taught, Byron, that was 20 years ago, right? So the
I know.
market moves
I'm going
faster.
back a little bit. I agree
But
with what
I
you're saying.
I think the market moves faster in general,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you got to look at 20 years ago. It's professional photography, like unheard of for like a digital camera was very cutting edge 20 years ago to take photos. So there's some things that speed up the market, which I agree with. And then Lisa, you're talking about appointments and inquiries. I'm seeing things happen that I'm shocked about. I was talking to someone yesterday. They are refinancing their home to get the cash out to pay off their ex, right? So no one would have done that the past 2 years, but now
Right.
you can't avoid making these decisions. And that's a motivation decision where when you start to see things like that happen, like, hey, I know this is what's going on, but I'm doing it anyway because it's what I need to do for my household or myself or my family or whatever. That's when you start seeing that happen where it doesn't make sense. It might make sense to wait a little bit and refinance. People can't wait any longer. I mean, they've held off these decisions long enough, hoping the market would move back to them. And the reality is the rates aren't coming down. And I think a lot of people were hoping that would be the case. But we're talking, I think, sevens for the rest of the year, guys. I mean, maybe high sixes.
I think super important to think back to your point, Tom, thinking back to, when was it, 2022, when a lot of agents were pushing consumers to make a purchase with the hope of being able to refi within 6 to 12 months. And I think reality is starting to hit for some of those consumers that refi to lower the rate wasn't necessarily, or isn't going to come to be, right? And then our other conversation this morning, how did jobs factor in, and inflation, and people just
Mhm.
starting to feel the pinch of living a little bit more paycheck to paycheck than they're used to, and a lot more than they're comfortable with. And I think all of those things just starting to come to play.
Yeah, I think that group expands every week. The
Yep.
week-to-week group is growing. When you think back 2021, that group was shrinking. Savings were going up. What's going
Yep.
up right now? Credit
Mhm.
requirement is going up. And so at the end of the day, as much as people want to go last resort, to your point, tap it into equity in some fashion, at some point that last resort gets presented to the table.
Right.
We're seeing it a lot sooner in other areas of the market in terms of the inventory. Logan, who you mentioned earlier in the pod, from Housing Wire, he doesn't believe we see real inventory across the country until that labor market breaks. And so, Lisa, you alluded to it. The job market, they keep putting out these numbers, being really low unemployment. But that, if you dig into it and you listen to some people that are really studying this, is being driven by a lot of second job, because people are hurting that bad that they're going out and getting second jobs.
Mhm.
So listen, some of these numbers, how come sometimes when things break in the economy, it's like, how come nobody saw that coming? Well, because sometimes they shove numbers down your throat that aren't necessarily giving you the real indications of what's going on in the background. And remember, this is an election year. So if there's ever a year for there to be some funny numbers out there, particularly with jobs, this would be the year.
Yeah, I'm looking at some data here from CNBC, Byron. So according to a survey they recently did, this was April the 9th, there's 65% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck right now compared to 58% last year. So it's a pretty large jump. We're also seeing even just the cost of groceries are up 5% compared to where they were last year. And the historical average rate of cost is 2.5. So it's double. And this is stuff everybody needs, right? Like, it's not like it's only certain people buy groceries. Everybody needs groceries. So this is very real, and wage growth hasn't been keeping up with that. And you talk about these funny numbers. You can make stats say whatever you want. I mean, it's frustrating to see that.
Well, what's one of the biggest supporters of the low unemployment right now? It's the construction, obviously. So there's two things. Government workers, that's been in number one or two for new hire, new payrolls every single month. There are tax receipts. There was a report in the Wall Street Journal this week. There are tax receipts that show that government is going to be significantly slowing down their hiring. And then another big support on great unemployment numbers is that the construction workforce has been growing and growing and growing. Well, when you look forward projections on housing starts, I think housing starts, this is something else Logan has said in the last week or so. I think housing starts are about to slow down. When you see existing active inventory in the country go up, builders will look at that as competition.
Yep.
And so they'll slow down on the housing starts. They better pump the brakes hard in Florida in particular, because I go around and I see people below, comps that are sitting in the market 90 days that already have experienced one or two price cuts. Florida's up 57% in inventory. So you're going to see these builders now pull back on housing starts because they see the competition from existing inventory. And what's that going to do? When they pull back, they put people on the unemployment line for a little while. So you'll see unemployment, and everybody's projections, including Fannie Mae's that they just came out with, expects unemployment to go up, not down. We're at a really low level. So that would be, but what Logan says is you'll see a lot of other industries follow if construction goes on the unemployment line. So there's a lot to be looking at, and there's a lot to be uncertain about with this economy. For knowledge brokers, we were talking about on our call, Tom, it's survive until 25. And then, 25 might be, all about when I think about this, less demand in the next 60 to 90 days, and you can just keep pushing that out every single month. But there's not less leads. There's still an abundance of opportunity for knowledge brokers who are willing to take the journey, do the long game, and have those, widen those relationships and that follow-up game so that you can find the 60 to 90. There's going to be 4 million plus transactions almost each and every single year. It's well off of 6 million. It's not easy anymore. It's not 2.75% 30-year fixed, but the market's going to move. There's going to be opportunities. There's going to be, listen, your compensation actually might be going up when you consider the problems you're solving are harder. I know there's some CEOs that think compensation is only going down because they're afraid that the game they've been playing for the last few decades is about to change. But I think there's great news for the great knowledge brokers. The problems got harder, which means your impact on the market can be more significant.
I look back always at like the financial crash. We were talking about that on our call today as well. And you talk about the long game. You know what good agents have been doing for decades? Playing the long game, right? At some point, I had a call last night with a client. Hey, maybe I'm moving the next couple of years. He told me he's getting divorced. He's thinking about settling stuff. He's like, I'm not buying anything right now. And I'm like, great. I don't want you to buy the next home. I want you to buy the right home. Let's talk about what's the most important to you. And that immediately eliminates that like sales commission breath that most agents, that's all they know how to do. And it's, look, if this guy buys and lists his home in the next 5 years, I'm cool. That's great. I want to be the person to do that in 5 years. And that's what great agents do. That's why they have long careers. But if you're not willing to play the long game, Byron, you're never going to get the quick hits, because the quick hits come as a result of all the follow-up and everything else you're doing. I cannot stress this enough.
And going back into, I am again, same things we keep talking about. I feel like it's kind of week after week, going deep into databases. I think new leads being generated is great, but I'm going to challenge that most agents have probably already generated the leads, but just need to finesse their skills a little bit to re-engage those that have already been sitting in their databases for 6, 12, 18, 24 months. So much money could be found, and opportunity can be found in what you've already invested in.
Yeah,
working what you have.
Mm-hmm.
When someone says I'm 2 years out, I think there's systemic issue with agents where there's a light switch that's like, well, hopefully they'll just call me in 2 years, as opposed to saying, oh, exciting. What's happening in a couple of years in your life?
Yeah,
And it's exciting news that you have a 2-year plan, and learn more about it so you can support them through it.
And the other side of it, one of the biggest mistakes that I see folks make is forgetting that even if the consumer says that they're 2 years out, this is what I go back to all the time. Going back into the shoe store analogy, right? You walk into the shoe store, I know I'm going to buy a pair of shoes, and the salesperson asks me, "Can I help you?" And my answer is no, right? And because I know that it's the way that they're going to leave me alone. And I think consumers have become conditioned to that as well. But what I always push back on with agents is that consumer took the action that they took for a reason. There was a level of intent there. And I don't know, maybe 50% of times, 2 years isn't 2 years. 2 years could be 6 months.
Never 2 years.
Right. And it's so important to not lose sight of it and to learn the skills to ask more questions, to dig deeper and truly understand how it is that you can help the consumer and earn the business.
Well, speaking of skills, Byron and I had I had a coaching call with Byron last night. A little pick me up, which is why I value the relationship. And you got a lot of time to hang out with Sharran, the leader. What is he, president over at Real? I don't
He's
know the
president
title.
at Real. He
Yes.
basically, Tamir's CEO runs the boring stuff because they're a public traded company, and Sharran does the leadership stuff with leading the brokerage there.
And what we talked, I mean, we talked about skill building and role playing and different things. And, I'm eyeballs deep in that right now at our organization. Sharran said something pretty interesting to you, Byron. And I'd love you to share that here because knowledge brokers, they need to hear this.
Yeah. I mean, Sharran always has interesting things to say. He's been a great friend of mine and NAR's for 10 plus years. And, he gets, here's one of the reasons why, Real is growing at the rate that they're growing, and models similar to them are not growing anywhere near this rate and are actually receding. And other brokerages across the country are receding in agent count because of the style of leadership that Sharran has. I said to Sharran, I said, my biggest concern if I was a Real agent is how long is Sharran going to be here? Right. He says, I'm fully committed, of course.
Of course.
And I believe that he is, but he's got a lot of, really good insights into how we should be training. And the reason why, when you listen to him talk about, how to talk to buyers and sellers right now, the reason he's so articulate in it is because of hours of training. He gave me the analogy about a football player training all week for 60 minutes on the weekend. They're required to be out there. And I actually was thinking about that analogy. I shared with my team. I said, I kind of even expanded on that a little bit, that analogy where it's like, we're up here, we're using scripts, we're standing up, we're using our body language, we're paying attention to our tonality. All of these are helpful resources to be really good when it comes game time. Just like a player, when they're on the practice field, there's cones, there's pads, there's different equipment that you don't find on the blank slate of the field when it's game time. When it's game time and you're in front of a customer about to go into a home tour, you're not going to be holding your script. The script isn't there for you to sound like a robot. It's there for you to put in the reps. And Sharran said, what he says to agents is, until you're as articulate in front of a buyer and seller as I am, who's no longer in production, meaning himself, then you've got more time to practice. Like the question of how much should I be training? Well, get to my level, and then maybe you can slow down on the training. So it's not a half-hour role play a day. Something that we've all been taught, and Sharran still preaches to this day, is when you're driving to appointments, you have a lot of time each and every single week to continue the training, that if you're getting good training in your office, to carry it over into the car. Tom and I were having this conversation. There's so many listing appointments that we've both gone to where we're just rehearsing into the windshield the entire ride over to the listing appointment. And thinking back on that, I mean, I still do it to this day. I'll talk to myself all the time. You know, there's this recent Barstool clip of Portnoy that on a podcast that kind of went semi-viral this week, where he's like, some people, I guess, don't have a voice in their head. There's like a name for it. He's like, how can they talk if they don't have a voice in their head? Like, how can you have a conversation if there's no voice in your head? I'll actually just take it a step further and have a conversation with myself. Not afraid to do that. I do it on the hot sheet every single morning. Have a conversation with myself.
I was talking to we do listing presentation practice, right? I mean, because these opportunities, I think some people are very cavalier with them. They just show up, they don't have a plan, they don't walk in. It's one of the reasons why I take a lot of listings when I go out there, because I practice this and it's the same appointment every time. And we were talking with one of the people on our team, and he had just got done the practice and said, "Man, I got thrown off by this, and this." And I'm like, "Hey, you should be grateful that didn't happen at a real appointment. That's why we're practicing now. You don't want to practice on paychecks." And the first listing I got that wasn't a total shit box, I remember this vividly. It was large single family home. They're interviewing other agents. The guy I met him at like 8:00 on a Tuesday night, like very difficult to get. I'm listening and practicing the appointment literally on the way over. And this is a year or two into my career. And I'm just like, man, I really got to get this listing. Like, this is game changer. And then as I was going through the appointment, this is like where consciously competent comes in. I'm like, all right, I got to do this next. And then I did it. And I have to say this next. And I did it. And I nailed it. And it's like that first time you do that without like the practice equipment, Byron, like you talked about, it goes such a long way. So I get this listing, tons of business comes out of it. He referred me to a friend of his that was selling a home. They referred me, like it's all these great things. But if I didn't practice and I just went over there and like, oh, I'll win on personality, or they like me, or I'm going to smile a lot. Like, this was a tactical plan to get a piece of business and help these people. And that taught me so much that it's a great example of exactly what you're talking about, Byron, because I'll never forget that. And that was literally like almost 20 years ago.
You have to work through these failures. I took over role play 100% with the team, and we had an agent who, shout out to Bray, she's doing amazing, she's just learning the scripting around buyer home tours right now and where we got to get to. But she was really, I said, hey, how do you feel about that? She's like, I really feel like it's coming off robotic. I'm reading it. I'm just reading it. Right. I said, okay. And it was like, we had gone through it a couple of times. I said, okay. I said, take it off the screen and drop the piece of paper. This is very simple what we're doing. The point of the paper and the point of the script reading on the screen is because we just need to know what we're trying to accomplish here. Now it's just the truth of what is going on in this market. Now just say it. Just say it to me. And the minute she did that, the words flowed. Okay, so the point is not to get the point of a script and training is not to nail it 100%, every single word. The point is to have the framework to be able to say it with confidence and have your tonality hit the moments that are critical to getting somebody to say yes, move the deal forward into an appointment where you put your odds at 75% plus of then moving the ball even forward more to get an opportunity to interview for the position of being their agent.
What I'm going to add too, so I've stepped into role play as well. I think it's one of the things that I've become passionate about myself. One of the most impactful role plays that I've been adding over the past 2 weeks is role playing conversations with the agent on the other side. Yeah, we had a huge uptick in our accepted offers, our pending deals over the past 2 weeks. And I know you guys both saw that as we tossed out our counts. And I think a lot of it is because I'm doing an hour a day, 3 days a week, where we are role playing through the conversation with the listing agent and coming up with scenarios that we're tossing at our folks to say, here's a scenario, buyer side, listing side, listing agent, buyer, draft offers, have the conversations. How do we role play through selling those offers, asking the right questions to figure out what's important to the other side and to create win-wins? And that one has been just as impactful as solid listing presentations and buyer presentations.
Well, think about this though. Like, we've all been in these situations where you get like multiple offers, right? And invariably, there's one agent that is a total jerk. They're very difficult to deal with. And they're like, oh,
Yep.
Byron, why won't you return my call? And like they get aggressive with you instead of just being nice. And I think that is a great idea, Lee. I literally put a note in my computer here that we're going to work on that at our buyer conversion workshop. I think that's genius.
Ah, thanks. Yeah, no, it's been
Never done
super
it.
fun. Yeah, just even the little things, right? Like we all know we should call the listing agent and ask questions, but how many times do we get the listing agent when we say what's important to the seller? Price and terms, a clean offer. And it's knowing what questions to ask so that we can really uncover some stuff or even just kind of break down the barrier on the other side. There's a little bit of a finesse that goes to that. And everybody listening to this podcast knows that often it's your relationship with the listing agent that determines whether your offer is accepted or not. It can be the difference between having the like least strong offer, but getting the opportunity to better it because the listing agent wants to work with you or give you another shot, or being slightly lower than a competing offer, but the listing agent knowing that that transaction is going to be such a great transaction that they encourage the seller to give that offer a little bit more consideration and maybe even accept it.
Sequencing is really important on these conversations with the agent to agent conversation that
Mm-hmm.
Lisa's talking about that they're training on. Sequencing meaning when are you having the conversation and asking the appropriate questions of the other agent. I promise you, if you don't expect a seller and a listing agent to give you something after you agree to terms,
Right.
whether it be verbally and or in print. Don't expect them to just give you some type of donation. These are conversations that need to be happening immediately. Okay, like you've got to be obsessed with getting those agents on the phone and getting into the right sequence. I tweeted out on X last night when the NFL draft was kicking off, Tom. You'll appreciate this. I said, agents, I tagged Adam Schefter. I said, agents, watch Adam Schefter's speed to lead tonight because
Ooh.
he's on the phone just rapid fire talking to GMs. He's obsessed with being first and being accurate. He doesn't put
Yes.
he rarely puts
Right.
out an inaccurate ever. Do you see an inaccuracy? But he's rapid fire speed on these conversations, which means he's got two phones. He's working the phones, right?
He does have
That's the
multiple
job.
phones.
Yeah.
If you his screen time, I think, was 21 hours during free agency a day. Like 21 hours on his phone. That is bananas. Very, great stuff,
Holy
Byron.
cow. 21 hours.
21 hours. It's 20. There were some minutes there too. So it was more than 21 hours. So Byron, you met someone else at T360.
I did.
Kevin Sears. I want to hear about this. I will say, from an outsider, I've only seen the clip that you dropped about when you talked about the salaries. I give him credit for sitting down with you because
So
we
do
know
I.
some other people didn't want to sit down with you
I
that
do.
probably should have from large companies that
Yes.
I know. So what was that interview like? Like, just tell us a little bit about what that was like. Because that guy, I don't envy his position, although I'm still kind of surprised he sold his business to Anthony Lamacchia. I think that's very questionable, but that's a whole nother story. What was that
Oh
like?
boy.
Tell me about this. I'm so curious because he's not in a great spot right now. He's taking a hard job.
So a couple things. So I was at the T3 Summit, which is an event annually put on by T360, as Tom mentioned. It's only about 400 people. Like you see, like I'm sitting down in one chair, and Glenn Sanford's two people next to me sitting down, taking notes, just like every other attendee. You have about a third MLS execs. I'm just going to paint the picture of what this event's all about. A third of them are MLS execs. A third are like tech software, prop tech people, and then a third basically brokerage CEOs, right? So the audience is Glenn Sanford. Mauricio was in the audience. Some of the speakers were Rich Barton, Damian Eales, Andy Florance, right? So that's kind of the theme there. And part of the deal was they had 30 minutes with Kevin Sears on stage. The minute I saw that, it was the only speaker they released ahead of time.
They never release anybody ahead of time.
They never do, but they were
That's never happened.
They were like, do you have questions, from the audience? Which, listen, sometimes on stage when you have 30 minutes, the person you're doing a fireside chat with can kind of filibuster. a little bit. And like he opened up with a pretty long story about that sale that you just referenced, that Sears, you know, he had a 50-year independent and he got into that, he got into some other things. And it's like, okay, whoa, dude, I'm looking at I'm like, I'm glad I'm doing a pod with him because we're 11 minutes in and we haven't really gotten into all the different questions. So shout out to Jared James. Huge thank you to Jared for being able to help me secure Kevin Sears to accept doing the pod. This is not Kevin Sears is in a tough position, being the president of an association that has made, you know, this podcast too. If you go and listen to it, the interview I did with Kevin over on the @NowBam YouTube channel, it was not my opportunity to rehash all of my opinions and be critical of NAR. That's well documented. Okay. So he's in a tough position because I've been critical of NAR for a reason, because we're talking about, in my, you know, decades of, you know, kind of building up some of the wrong moves and some of the wrong decisions and, you know, kind of just expanding the bureaucracy. If you look at NAR, you can almost look at it like the US government to some degree. It's like Kevin's the face, the president, but there's a shadow group that has high influence on the decision making. In particular, one of the questions I asked him was about staff salaries. It's something people look at that report every single year. And it's like, huh, that's interesting. You know, these people are in these positions for years and their salary goes nowhere but up. CEO makes 2.5 million. And this was the only time I felt like there was a level of discomfort in the room that unless you were in the room, you could feel it. He's like, that's the CEO's decision. Okay, well, you're the president and you represent the members. Like, we have no say. The CEO's at 2.5 million. Of course, the CEO is going to want high inflated salaries, or there's going to be upheaval there. So he's in a spot, I'll say, that is he has to be in cleanup mode. I give him so much credit and I honor his decision to actually do the pod. We sat down for 60 minutes.
It was a long one. There was a lot in there.
There was a lot in there, and I've never seen a past NAR president do that when there's this much going on. The last two, obviously, you know, with all the issues that they had, they only did teleprompter reading. So I find him to be pretty authentic. Did I love every single answer he gave me? It's well documented how I feel about some of the questions that I've asked him. So I didn't love every answer. I do find him to be a normal guy. I don't find him to be somebody who is out to get the industry. I think he's in a tough spot. I think that he has played the game that, you know, the game that I don't necessarily have a lot of love for, the game of working your way through NAR. I think that I asked the question about politics in NAR. I think there's way too much politics. He's been a good politician, I'll say, in a nice way, to get to where he is. Lisa, did you listen to it?
I'm like 75% of the way done.
All right. So what stood out to you? I asked him a question about Zillow at the end, so I guess you didn't get there.
I didn't get there yet. No.
Right up Lisa's alley.
Right now.
Well, I just asked him I said, has Zillow reached out to NAR? Because here's why I asked that question. Because Rich Barton on the stage at T3 said to the industry, you guys cannot let them break this thing up. He's talking about the MLS when he says that. You know,
because they're a broker, Byron. They are a broker.
Because he believes that the MLS, which I think we all believe, is great for consumers. Like there shouldn't be less access to listings. That's number one.
Agree.
On Zillow, right? And we all agree on this.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious. I was like, hey, I'm just curious. I mean, has Zillow reached? They're very much an advocate for listing transparency. Maybe they reach out to NAR and said, hey, you know, here's some money to help the brokerage community out, or here's some legal help, or here's some. He's like, oh, that's not to my knowledge, but maybe you could spread that word. We could have that conversation a bit. But what stood out to you, Lisa?
The bulk of my notes were around the ad campaign and the dues assessment, and he had made an interesting comment. You asked some questions about the impact of that ad campaign, trying to track numbers. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm all about numbers and being able to track. And so I found that fascinating. And then just his comment that he thought that the consumer-based ad campaign was also kind of intended to replace some of the advocacy, because I think his exact words were, those in charge will see the campaigns and understand consumer sentiment. I am going to be totally honest, until I watched the pod and then went over and Googled the NAR ad campaigns, I wouldn't have been able to tell you what they were. I don't know. Do either of you? Can you
Yeah,
recall them?
I've done a
Per-
big breakdown on this on the BAM YouTube channel on the Real World. Like, I've gone through every campaign. I don't know if you know this, but they're in season 5 of a Hulu show that
Oh,
they pay for, because Hulu didn't come to NAR and say, wow, I think this would be amazing content.
right.
They pay for that placement to be in front of the consumer, and that's part of what they consider advocacy. I consider advocacy twisting the arm of these dirty politicians in DC to do what's right for consumers. That's what I
Right.
consider advocacy.
I agree with that.
I'm all in. That's why it was shocking to me when he actually said that he thought that these ad campaigns were part of that, and that's been what the dues assessment has been used for.
I've heard these ads on the radio occasionally, but it's like, wow, that ad kind of sucked. Like it's something I would change the dial on. So
And
I don't agree with that. And no one watches commercials anymore anyway. They fast forward them. I mean, everyone watches stuff on demand. So
Right.
I had Rob Hahn on the Real Word, and I played for him a Connecticut Association of Realtors Super Bowl commercial. Lisa, when your beautiful girls were 11 years old, they could have put this commercial together. I think I might have been able to get my 7-year-old to scab this thing together on her iPad. It was like photography B-roll, and the Connecticut Association of Realtors paid for a Super Bowl local ad. So you have local boards, and in the comments you can tell us what your local board's doing. I see local billboards when I drive up and down 95 in Connecticut. You have these local boards taking the lead from NAR to spend money. What does this spending of our dues do? It does. And my point about the data question was, it doesn't impact consumers' decisions. I think the influence they have in DC has an impact on doing what's right for consumers. And I do think NAR has an obligation, obviously, to do that, but has their heart in the right place to go advocate for consumers. They have a great track record of doing that. But I think the spending on public advertising is to continue to swell the bureaucracy and to swell and inflate staffing salaries. And there's
I
a lot
agree.
of fat you could trim from that. But at the bigger it gets, you never see a cut. That's what you typically see with government agencies. Think about the military industrial complex. Why does it cost us so much to produce? There was this is just an example. I'm not a military expert, obviously, but when we were shooting down those missiles coming from Iran to Israel, not to get crazy here. I just want to give you a mathematical.
Not to get crazy, but about to get crazy.
No. I just want to give you a mathematical analogy. So the missiles that the Iranians were shooting over were drones that cost about $40,000 a pop. The missiles that we use, this was, our dime, U.S. taxpayer dime, to shoot down those drones cost us $400,000 a pop. So if I'm Iran, it's like, okay, nothing hit my target. That's a win for me because I just cost a competitor $360,000 a pop. I'll do that all day long because eventually I'm going to drain the competitor out.
Right.
The more we just keep sending out missiles from an NAR perspective, ads, spending money on ad campaigns that actually we don't have data to back up, that are hitting with consumers, eventually we run out and we can't do the things that are really important, which is advocacy within policy, which is obviously now paying what's owed for these lawsuits. So I have a problem. I continue to have a problem with that, but I wasn't going to go ahead and go on the rant that I just went on here on this pod. And with Kevin, he knew where I stood. That's why he didn't want to do the pod, and Jared had to convince him to do it. But I honor him for his willingness to get up in front of so many members, so many real estate agents across the country, so much of the BAM community, and have the 60-minute conversation. He didn't review one of my questions. Again, shout out to Jared for actually convincing him, hey, Byron's not gonna do any gotcha moments. He's gonna ask hard questions as he should. I asked harder questions than what I certainly heard from the stage, which was a little disappointing. I think at the stage they have a real obligation to press a little bit harder than they probably did. One big takeaway I have from this is that I actually don't think NAR is going to fail. Here's why.
Oh boy.
They're committed to protecting the tie-in agreement, which I have opinions about that. The tie-in agreement that you don't get access to the MLS unless you are local board. And he shot back at that. He's like, no, that's only in some states.
Well, it's
Okay.
my state. Yeah. I mean, we have no choice.
It's only in some states, but there's a lot of states that's the case. And then even in the states where it's not the case, there is a significant influence on a lot of the MLSs. And so that influence that NAR has on the MLS, they do not want to let go of. That'll be the last thing that they ever let slip from their grip, in my opinion, which I think is going to keep membership at a certain level, that grip that they have on it. By the way, big takeaway just from T3 is MLSs have so much power right now in this industry. Zillow doesn't want MLS to be broken up. Zillow is advocating for MLS. NAR wants their grip on MLS. Obviously, brokers want access to. Everybody wants MLS, and you can see, okay, brokers have concern about how they're moving forward. Some brokers, I'd argue, even have fear about moving forward. Tech people, they're always in a race for more money because they've got to continue to innovate on the product and get more customers, and they see customers going down. Subscription software will see less customers as the economy weakens. Who is just walking around the fattest and the happiest, both figuratively and literally, in these events? It's the MLS execs. I mean, they just are not worried about anything because they control the cards.
Well, I know Lisa's had a couple run-ins with her MLS. I can tell you we have as well, where it's some of the things that are happening. We got fined for something, right? And I said, well, I read your policy online here, and you told me I have 48 hours to correct it. And we adjusted it as soon as you let us know, because it was like a for sale sign in a picture. It was obviously like an error. We've taken thousands of listings, right? It's the one time it happens. Oh, you got to take this class instead, or we're not going to waive the fine. And I'm like, well, your policy says this. I'm not going to pay you $300, $400 because of a clerical error at the volume we're doing. No bend whatsoever. You had a run in with like the clear cooperation policy, which is one of the reasons why the NAR settlement might have happened is the clear cooperation policy. That was certainly a bitch for a lot of people, and it doesn't benefit the consumer. That's an MLS thing. That's an MLS-driven policy. I don't care what anyone says. They want to control the information. I think that's a great observation on your point, Byron, and it's unfortunate because I think the MLSs do control a lot of stuff. It's like, hey, you want MLS access? Here we are. Now I got to cut my PAR check, my NAR check, my local board check, all those things.
I can hit you with my couple of big takeaways from the three prop tech or the three portal CEOs in a minute, but just Lisa, any reaction to what Kevin said on the pod, where he said, we had to go forward with the settlement. We had to carve out all those 2 billion plus members because the only other option for NAR was bankruptcy. And in bankruptcy, this is their position, NAR's position, is that would have only protected NAR, and all those brokers would have been left out anyways. But they never, to where the brokers come from, they never had a conversation with them. Maybe those brokers would have voted for bankruptcy. They never had that conversation up front. What's your reaction to what Kevin said there?
Yeah, I still stand by my thoughts on it. I maybe slightly more understand his take on it. And, NAR is going to always protect NAR, just like we're always going to protect our individual organizations. I think it goes back to the tie-in and the control of MLS. It's interesting, right? Thinking back to the settlements that came out before the NAR settlement, I think REMAX was one where they said that they were no longer going to require agents to be a member of NAR, right?
Mhm.
But if the tie-in agreement remains, and the only way that REMAX agents can access the MLS in their local markets is by being a member of NAR, like what's the point, right? And I think when you look at some of those bigger brokerages that were shut out, uh, in my conversations with like Mike Hickman, who wasn't included, and a couple of other folks who weren't included in it, these are people who have massive agent bases whose dues have largely funded NAR over the years. I don't know. I stand by my
And
my
and
thought.
I said that. I said, "Hey, they've supported," and
Yeah.
he agrees. He actually, agreed with that statement. So, shout out to Kevin Sears for doing it. He's been way more accessible than any NAR president I've ever seen in my career. I think he's doing the right thing. He didn't check with NA. Go check out the pod if you haven't, or the interview if you haven't
It was a
listened to
good
it.
one. Yeah.
He did not check with NAR staff because I know NAR staff, they watch this stuff, by the way. And I know they
I'm
would have
sure they
said,
do.
you're not getting on with that lunatic. He's out of his mind. Okay. That would have been the advice there. So shout out for him to saying, that's to me, that is a sign of somebody who is doing everything they can to lead. When you're like, I'm not going to listen. I know what the right thing to do is in my gut. I'm going to go ahead and get on this pod, and we can agree to disagree maybe on some of the answers there for sure. A couple big takeaways. Rich Barton said, what's going on in real estate is not very radical. This is a category 1 storm. He said that COVID was a category 5 storm. So from a Zillow perspective, from a Rich Barton perspective, none of what we're going through is very radical. Digitize the industry as a whole is very important. He says more than half of their revenue right now comes from, which is over 2 billion, comes from revenue other than Premier. So, he was talking about Follow Up Boss and some of these other acquisitions. Access, he talked
Does that
about his
include Flex? Is
from
Flex in Premier?
for
Is that
Flexes and
grouped
Premier.
together?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm just clarifying. All
Yeah.
right.
Flexes and Premier. So, he wanted to really highlight that they're not dependent on Premier.
How's that make all those buyer agents out there?
I
Those
well, I mean, this is where I would have followed up on that question if I was, Stefan. He didn't follow up on that, of course, but,
Of course.
he's got his ARC, access, representation, compensation. Access needs to be uniquely transparent in this, that's something we need to hold on to in this country. So, that to me sounds like a real support of MLSs. And that's why I asked Kevin Sears a question. Have you heard from Zillow? Hey, if Zillow has their thumb on MLSs, Zillow's passionate about keeping MLSs, maybe there's some support that we could see from there. Representation, adamant about it being independent, and compensation should be fair and negotiated. We've heard that from them before. And so that was Rich Barton's big takeaways. Any reaction to, I guess, maybe the digitizing of the industry as a whole, or that this is not a very radical change?
The radical change thing is surprising to me. I mean, I felt like when all this happened, it was very similar to COVID, where like we were told not to go to the office and we couldn't practice, and we were. I don't see this as a 1 versus a 5. I think they're kind of. The thing about COVID was you knew it was going to end at some point. I don't see an end in sight for this here. So but other industries have gotten disrupted like real estate has. So maybe
No,
that's where he's coming from.
But I
the
don't see this as an end. I guess that's,
Well, that's my point. Like COVID,
yeah.
you were going to come out of it at some point. Like we were going to be
Oh,
allowed to leave our houses and do things.
I mean, we
well,
still have the
but
buy side. There's a lot coming. Yeah.
yeah, i- interesting. Like I said, I've been super bullish on this could be a really good thing for the industry. So, and I know I'm in the minority about that, but I think it could be really good for agents. I think it can be really good for the consumer. I'm maybe not a 1 versus a 5. So what did we say COVID was, a 5?
Well, this is what Rich Barton said, 5, and
This is
then a
what he
category.
said.
He said this is a category
Right.
1.
Well, so I wouldn't say a 1, but I would say, how about a 2.5?
Yeah,
I
that's
don't think
fair.
this is as bad as COVID. I think that was a whole different kind of beast in a different way.
I'd agree with you. I think that, yeah, it was definitely a different beast, and I just think that this is the next era,
Yes.
and if
Okay.
if you don't like, if you're a player that doesn't like the game, find a new game.
Yep.
That's kind of the deal there. Okay, so that was Rich Barton. Damian, who we're gonna have on from Realtor.com, CEO, in a couple of weeks. He was very critical of the numbers that Homes.com is putting out. Just kind of like when we're talking about everybody can have different numbers. And so Andy had a response to that. But I did find Damian to be a little bit more focused on the numbers with homes, and really kind of just more focused on homes. I thought they kind of had gotten past that, both sides, and it seems like he went back to that to some degree. And then they spent a lot of time on the advocacy ad, which, listen, here's what I'll tell you. Us three might be the only ones that have publicly been critical of that ad. And you know what's funny?
Well,
Every time I ask,
we were not publicly critical of the ad. We were publicly
correct.
critical of the article.
That's what I meant.
But
The
I'll
op-ed.
tell you that ad, you can't even read that thing. I mean, like, it's so small. I mean, think about the consumer side of that. Hey, here's 111 things we do. That would you'd be lost with most people. To
It's
me,
almost like you're
it's
trying
got to
to
be.
make me lost, and then I guess that's the idea behind the ad is like, "Oh, just go hire an agent." So, here's everybody's take executive-wise from the ad. When I was talking to them out there, it was, "Hey, anything that is, advocating for buyers, I'm a fan of." Okay, cool. That's fair. I got that. And then I follow up with, "What'd you think of the op-ed?" "Well, I just told you what I thought." No, those are two different things, guys. The opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal and the ad are two different things. Like, please pay attention to what's going on, because there was over 1,000 comments in the Wall Street Journal from consumers who did pay attention, who read the entire op-ed, and had an opinion on it. So, my problem right now a little bit is a lot of these execs want to keep, when you talk about the MLS control and just overall the elitist mindset in the industry, they want to keep the rats running in the cage. And anytime you come up with, "Hey, didn't love that op-ed, here's why." Hey, why don't you just keep that to yourself? You don't really have to share that opinion. Just shut up and go serve buyers and sellers. Yeah, I can have an opinion while I serve all the buyers and the sellers in the community, because you're not, right? Like, we're doing the job, we're doing the work, and I'm a knowledge broker. I have a right to have an opinion and be educated on this stuff. And I would argue that our opinion here on this pod is just as, if not more, valuable than some of those folks across the industry. They're like, "Could you stop? Could you stop talking?" You sound, when you say, "Can you stop having an open conversation?" That's why I honor Kevin Sears for having it. You sound like a whiny bitch. So if you're that person saying, "Why don't you stop focusing on having an opinion and being knowledgeable about the industry?" You sound whiny, and you should stop. You should be willing to engage in a little bit of debate. A little bit of debate shouldn't make you uncomfortable. It's
Don't a
how
lot
we
of these
grow. It's
folks
how we get better.
Well, don't a lot of these folks talk about having a growth mindset? Like, aren't you supposed to honor other opinions? You accept feedback. You may not act on it all, but I just look at that ad, right? And imagine, you get an analytical person, they might read it. You get a driver. A driver's going to throw that thing out the window. They're not going to look at it. They want like 4 bullet points about what you do differently. That's it. An amiable person, maybe they read it, maybe they don't. And the expressive, they don't care, right? Like, I can tell you from dealing with consumers, when you throw too much at them, it overwhelms them and
And
causes paralysis instead of, hey, here's 10 things I'm going to do differently to get your offer accepted. Let's break it down real quick, and then let's act on it and get focused on your goals. That's much more effective from being in the arena on a daily basis.
yeah,
Can I just Did either of you actually read the 111 things?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay.
I didn't, but I couldn't read them. But I went on a little rant there.
I got my magnifying
rant was
glass
not
out.
reflective. I just want to make this clear. My rant was not reflective of the overall Damian realtor discussion. We're gonna have plenty of time to talk to Damian in 2 weeks. So, my rant was there is a elitist mindset in the industry. This is not a realtor.com discussion. This is a across the industry where they just want you to ignore the obvious and not have an opinion on it. I have a big problem with that.
You don't say.
I'll stand up for our ability to have a voice at the table for as long as I'm doing this. So Andy obviously talked about Matterport. He's going to be giving free Matterports to all of their members. They're going to be adding about 1,000 photographers to be able to do that. When they launched on Super Bowl, the $1 billion campaign, they got 8,000 memberships in 6 weeks. That's $40 million in revenue. Apartments.com, for example, took 7 years to have a quarter with 40 million in revenue. So they're very excited about the revenue that they're generating off of these ads. Obviously 40 million in a quarter, they're going to spend $1 billion. There's a long-term play here for sure. But the comparison to apartments.com was interesting that they accomplished in 1 quarter what it took them 7 years to accomplish in a quarter with apartments. They said it's the most aggressive real estate ad campaign ever. It's going to take them 3 to 5 years to get to where they want to be. He said the and CoStar is fully committed. They've got more money than anybody, and they're willing to leverage it. Here's his favorite number. I want your guys' take on this. Andy Florence's favorite number on their ad campaign is that they've had 9.4 billion impressions just in the last month of a firm or brokerage name. They've put that at the top. They want to get the attention back to the firm or brokerage. So he really highlighted that. 9.4 billion impressions in the last month. They're going to do over 100 billion impressions on the firm's name, where we know obviously that's not highlighted on other portals. Okay, no reaction there. Anyways,
it's impressions. I mean, the impression game is what Zillow Premier Agent pricing used to be, but it was on the, and then we'd go to conferences all the time. I remember Lisa Chinatti was part of this, and people would complain, I'm not getting enough leads for my impressions, but they had no reviews. They didn't build out their profile. Like, there's other work you have to do to convert that into business. It's great you can drive traffic, but if you're driving traffic and spending money and not converting, it's wasted capital. So that's, you have to look at the other components there.
What I'll say too, for indies like me, that's a definite plus, but I look at the both of you, and does that actually benefit either of you?
Right. He's focused on traffic, but I think what he's talking about is a 3 to 5 year play to get maybe that high converting lead. I mean, certainly I think we'd all agree. And just with our own teams, our agents are very excited when they receive a realtor.com lead.
Yep.
And Zillow and realtor.com are certainly portals that are converting leads. Those leads are have a much higher conversion rate, would be a better way to say it. And those leads are coming in abundance. There's also an argument that there's maybe too many leads being generated, which is why I think agents are very excited when they receive a realtor.com lead, because there's a vetting process that is definitely at the top of the list in terms of what they go through there. So, all right, that's a little bit of that. We don't have any more time. I can see Lisa is about to crawl out of her skin with the length of this podcast. So I think we'll end it there.
Those 7 minutes really were painful for Lisa Chinatti. Oof.
Lisa, what are you late for? Or you look like you have to run to the bathroom,
I forgot all my fidgets because I was running late. I legit have nothing in my hands, and I've had nothing in my hands this whole time.
Lisa, what's up with the hoodie today? You're getting very trendy on us.
Yeah, it is what it is. Fine.
Trendy Chinatti on the pod. We've got Damian Eales from Realtor.com in 2 weeks. By the way, I haven't told you guys yet. I won't be with you next week, I don't think.
Again?
Best pod ever coming up. Blaming me for vacations.
Maybe we'll switch the time. We'll see you guys next week.
Breaking news here on Knowledge Brokers, Byron. We're back. We logged out of the show. HomeServices.
Is this the first ever curtain call on Knowledge Brokers Pod?
Yeah, I feel like people wanted to hear more. They're cheering for us. The lights haven't gone on at the concert yet, so very cool. So HomeServices, the last remaining brokerage defendant in the Sitzer-Burnett commission case, agreed to pay $250 million in damages to settle the lawsuit that will change the way real estate agents get paid. Hypothetically, we'll see about this settlement and how things go. The New York Times was the first to report the story, and this comes days after the federal judge overseeing the commission case in Missouri approved a preliminary settlement from NAR. Big number here. What do you think, Byron?
One, I wonder how the New York Times gets all these stories. They've been really good at breaking these real estate stories. Since they've got somebody on the inside there. Tom, I was trying to get Gino on an interview this week at T3 because he always attends that.
And he's usually very generous with his time, by the way. Gino is a great guy.
Oh, yeah. He goes, listen, if I wasn't in the middle of these negotiations right now, I'd be coming and I would do that interview with you. So I'm glad to see that Gino's on the other side of it. One of the best executive leaders ever, and certainly of our time. Mm-hmm. I'll just tell you my initial reaction. Haven't dug into this because it's just we got off the pod and we came right back on. Lisa had to jet, but we saw the breaking news, which we filmed. This was posted at 10:57. We stopped at like 11:07, so it broke 10 minutes before we stopped the recording of the pod here Friday morning. The $250 million is a huge number. They paid more than half of what the National Association of Realtors paid. Mm-hmm. They don't do more than half of the trend. Compass has a lot of share, and Compass got 50. I mean, to me, it's like, wow, Compass got themselves a great deal.
Compass Remax came out pretty well on this.
The people that settled first got the best deal.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you know what Michael Ketchmark has said the entire time is we feel like we got the most money from these people when every settlement's been announced, right? And obviously, HomeServices is part of a larger company that has a lot more capital to deal with, and I'm pretty clear that was their target. They said, hey, these guys can pay. We're going to get it from them. And unfortunately, they were in a tough spot being the last to settle versus the first. And again, we've talked about how if you would have operated together, this might have gone a little better. That's out the window at this point, and they got to look out for their company.
If this is the kind of money that they were after from the start, then certainly NAR, if they were to, I think one thing that, NAR said, hey, we would have had to go bankrupt if we were going to pay the whole thing here. And what I guess the overall point that you can start to kind of see in that situation is they go bankrupt. NAR is cleared, or they're stayed from these suits, but every other brokerage is still wide open. So, again, that's their argument. Sure. I don't know, but maybe Gino feels differently. The $250 million is a huge, huge number. I actually can't believe it. I thought it would come in maybe around 100.
I don't think there's any question. Michael Ketchmark is a personal injury attorney, right? So what those people know how to do is how to get money out of the other side. So I'm clear that was, the reason they probably didn't settle is because they probably tried a lower number and they wouldn't agree to it. I mean, that's the longer negotiations go, it doesn't turn out well. Sometimes it's better to try to stick the deal at the beginning.
Yeah, HomeServices of America is the third largest brokerage in the country by transaction side at 235,000 plus in 23. According to the latest Real Trends rankings, the Minnesota headquartered firm had $133.8 billion in sales volume in 2023, but that's not revenue. Okay, so it's not like, $250 million on $133 billion is nothing. That's volume minus expenses, splits, everything like that, and you only get maybe 2 to 3% on that number to begin with, and then you minus all your splits, and BHHS is like an 80 to 90% split deal, I would imagine at this point. over with the people that are driving most of that volume anyways.
But I mean, here's the deal, though. Berkshire Hathaway has a market cap of $869 billion. So that's why they came after him like this. I don't think there's any question, right? I mean, that's who's ultimately paying the bill here.
Yeah, the parent company must have, supported this. So, okay, that's interesting, because then maybe does Warren believe there's a lot of viability long-term with the Home Services brand? Because the other decision would have been one similar to what NAR was faced with. Okay, do we just shut this thing down? I mean, it's Home Services is a very, very small line item on the Berkshire Hathaway ledger. It's not a big deal for them with everything that they own, but obviously supporting them fully. And we're just assuming here that maybe the parent company basically was supportive of this.
Yes, yeah. I mean, this is very early news. Now, what I do know, I think it speaks to the viability of the industry, because, I'm a big believer there's a bright future for tacticians, for practitioners, for people that take this seriously, knowledge brokers, whatever you want to call them. So Warren Buffett maybe believes the same thing. Housing is a basic need, and Lisa said this earlier. She thinks this is a positive for the industry to flush out some of these hobbyists, the part-timers for sure. And maybe that's what Warren Buffett believes, because there's some really great agents that work for Berkshire Hathaway. I mean, we all know them, right?
A ton.
Doug Edgerton, a good friend of ours. He's got like the top 5 or 6 team in Berkshire Hathaway year after year. So that's one example of many. So Warren probably believes there's a space for real estate here, which I'm a believer of. And, sometimes in business, it's better to buy your way out of a problem than fight the problem. I learned that from my mentor early on, where if you can buy your way out of a problem, Byron, you don't have a problem. And that might have been what happened here.
And really, that's what everybody's deciding to do. We'll see what happens with some of these other brokerages. These, I would call them middle to large, these independents that are kind of stuck in the middle, literally. You've got all the big ones now who have cleared the deck. You've got the small ones that NAR protected, and you've got that middle to top middle right now that has some uncertainty. There's a lot of belief that a lot of these people that don't operate in Missouri are just going to say, screw it. Why the heck would I settle? But then they're opening themselves up to all those copycat ones, of course, because the settlement addresses copycats. The settlement, by the way, is supposed to be finalized in November. That's when the judge will officially rule on it. But I guess we'll just wrap with saying, I guess it's a congratulations to Gino. I'm glad it's behind Gino. One of the best operators in the business, and we need his time freed up to make an impact on the business other than dealing with this.
I'm all about being positive and moving forward, Byron, when things go wrong. And this is a massive hurdle to get over for any company. So I see it as a positive because they can focus on what actually matters, which is helping consumers and buying and selling real estate.
That's right. All right, let's keep going, getting that knowledge. See you, bud. We know that in 2024, your business operations will be more important than ever. Once I figured this out, my business was able to scale and take off. See, generating leads is one thing, but getting that deal across the finish line while keeping everyone happy is another story. Enter Mosaic, everything you need once a lead becomes a client. Mosaic picks up where CRMs leave off to streamline the client experience and maximize your productivity. It's the operating platform that gives agents and teams everything they need to stay organized and proactive throughout the entire transaction process and beyond. Transaction management, forms, AI-powered collaborative search, client retention capabilities, and advanced analytics for your business. In other words, you can use Mosaic to create a powerful flywheel for your business. It will help you close every deal, boost your profitability, and generate more repeat and referral business. If you need a better way to run your business, check out the link below and learn how Mosaic can help you today. At BMX, we listen to what real estate professionals want and need. That's why our platform is filled with sought-after courses, content, and tactical assets for your business. And that's why we launched BMX in a box with templates and scripts done for you, delivered each Friday. The best part? It's not coming from panel pontificators who bought their followers and don't sell any real estate. It's coming from top agents, team leaders, and content creators in the industry. It's education that actually shows you how to do what you need in today's market. And now it includes editable templates and scripts so you can easily deliver that knowledge to your database. Every day, we continue to add more content into BAMX, into our private Facebook community, content that works, content that our members have exclusive access to daily. Do not wait any longer. Use code KNOWLEDGEBROKERS and join the thousands of agents taking their business to the next level today. Use Knowledge Brokers for 10% off. See you in BAMX.